Aurobindo in thanking the Bashis for organizing this conference, and Julian and AVI US for supporting us to be there. It's a very interesting experience to be exactly 12 hours on the other side of the globe, and to have this kind of, to be really, that feeling of being on the extreme different side, it's really strong also for me as well. I will have to give a presentation on what Bindo included in the dark aspect of Auroville. We are talking of a project of...
Thank you for embracing the shadow.
We are talking of a project of divine anarchy. Bindo mentioned complaining about bureaucracy and hyper-organization, and a bit about chaos. All these elements are there in our life. We are a strange mix, a combination of bureaucracy and chaos, and something is a mess. So I will talk briefly, hopefully, I'm keeping a watch to the end, I will skip a few slides, about planning of the city, the regional context in which we are placed, and the organization and the economy. All these topics fit not so well with what normally we consider a conventional utopian experiment. Actually, I would term at the best Auroville as a semi-utopian experiment for different reasons. In the context in which utopian has been meant in the Western context, utopian is something which is very well accomplished with a very defined goal and definition how a society functions. This is not the case of Auroville. We are actually a work in progress. We are far from representing something which is an idea, but we are attempting, evolving through different means, so to go toward a certain direction. Utopian also means a certain aspect of isolation. I mean, in Thomas More it was an island. In all the rich literature of the Renaissance, whether it was called Arcadia or New Atlantis, it was all the time island or something separate by the rest of the world. In our case, we are very much mixed. It is also one of our objectives, but sometimes even too much mixed and intertwined. And third aspect, most of the utopian experience description that we got in the literature aim to indicate a society which has a very well-defined structure in the way it functions, its governance, its system, or its architecture, etc. We don't know what will be the final shape of Auroville. Maybe there will be no final shape. I mean, it's a constant progress in evolution. We have certain basic guiding principles, which are actually highlighted in the three documents mentioned by Bindo, and we try to live by that and evolve by that. Given this preamble, I will start with the concept of town planning. As you've seen at the very beginning, as most of you are aware, Auroville was started to develop in a very inhospitable place, in a very eroded plateau. So the first work and attempt that has been made has been that of soil regeneration. In the second slide, you will see how Auroville appears today. And then there is this conceptual plan, which is a conceptual plan, it's not a fixed religious plan, how it can possibly evolve in a city of 50,000 people in the future. It's one of the possibilities, the main possibility, but is not necessarily a rigid plan. So the first aspect of the operation that took place on the region of Auroville, it was to soil regeneration, creating a fertile environment, soil regeneration, afforestation, and water control. One of the characteristics of Auroville is that we try to share whatever capacity and building we are having, we try to share with our local neighbors, our local region. So for example, this is a picture of a project we made in Chennai, the capital of the state of Tamil Nadu. It's a mega city of 9 million inhabitants, one of the fourth major of India, and they have one river which was heavily polluted, and we undertook a project for regeneration of the area. Until now it has become one of the few green parks for the city of Chennai. Similarly, also it is not shown here, we helped the neighbor city of Pondicherry to get financing from the European Commission to make a project for restoring all the heritage sites that were very fast disappear and demolished to give place to new building, and we helped them to implement the project with advice and experience in town planning. Organic farming, of course, has been the first part because we aim to be a city, but we feel that food security is one key element of town planning, and we have 26 farms within Auroville, but we are also, in terms of town planning, strongly encouraging the development of urban farming. The practice of include urban farming in all single space that are there in the town. Of course, architecture is one element of the town planning. Actually, Auroville at the moment is a kind of paradise for architects. Out of a population of 2,800 people in recent data, we have at least 50 to 60 architects. I'm not joking, it's a number. And plus, we have a lot of volunteer relation with universities, so we have a floating population of architects, which is very high because there's the cities to be built, and it's a natural attraction for them. So we talk about planning, and we just have a brief of how this planning emerged in the period between 65 and 67. Here are a few images of different studies that were done in that period. It's not that so-called galaxy concept emerged out of nowhere. There was a long process also of internalization and interiorization before reaching to that. These are some of the studies. Basically, the Sri Aurobindo foretold the constitution of an ideal spiritual society and Sangha already since the 1930s. There was at that time a proposal from the state government of Hyderabad, that at the time was a semi-independent sultanate inside India, to offer a place to create a constitute, some kind of Sangha. At that time, the idea was to somehow to be a place that attempted to create a kind of city in isolation from the rest of the world, to create a system for accelerated evolution. But things slowly changed. In 1954, the mother again reiterated the dream. It is one of the main documents presented by Bindu before. Actually, when mother presented this dream, it was not, the idea of Auroville was not yet there. But was an indication of some urgent need and aspiration that something has to happen if you want to change the world. Something has to be taken in the society, not in isolation. In 1961, Mother mentioned the need to have an ideal city as an embryo of future supplemental world. And finally, in 1964, Auroville was announced as a project to be implemented. So there has been a long internal evolution even between the founder of the project. So between 1965 and 1966, there has been an intensive work to evolve a concept of planning for the city that was mainly elaborated by the French architect Roger Anger. And those were here where in Auroville there was a lot of attention on city building. Roger was very much inspired by the Le Corbusier and construction of Chandigarh city. Incidentally, one close of Le Corbusier, Dr. Doshi, which is one of the main architects in India, has been in charge of our town planning for a few years after the passing away of Roger. But many other cities were built in those time of the year in India. There was Gandhinagar in Gujarat, a new area as a township from Bhubaneswar in Orissa. So there was very much also part of India the spirit of the creation of the city. Basically, Roger presented to the mother two kinds of layout proposals. One, which we call a rectangular layout, a very conventional layout how a city could be made, although it remind a bit some Aztec drawings to some extent. This was not accepted by the mother, and he presented a kind of circular layout. This circular layout was somehow taking some inspiration from the radial concept of the ideal city of the Renaissance in Italy. In Italy, 14th, 15th century, there have been many towns that have been built with the ambition to be the ideal city from the architectural point of view. And this radial concept was very much common in many of these cases. And what is interesting is that during the Renaissance, we have a lot of exploration on ideal city, but they are either pure architectural exploration, or there are literal exploration that explain how the governance function, how the society function. There is no example during the Renaissance of an utopia ideal city of Arcadia that tried to combine both. Auroville had the ambition to combine both, giving the idea that new form can express, a new type of life can be expressed in new form. And there is a research in going this direction, which is far from being accomplished, but that explains why a lot of attention would be given. Out of the two models, Mother actually preferred the round one. The model on a rectangular shape was somehow not accepted because it gave an idea of seclusion. So the idea was for the round one to have an idea of more inclusion. As I said before, Auroville is started not anymore, when Auroville idea came again back in the 60s, is not anymore as an experiment isolated by the world, but as an experiment where people run a normal life in a normal society and work and try to manifest a new spiritual consciousness and a new way of living. So that's why there was certain preference on this direction. Still, there was a need to further elaborate on this concept, to give a type of dynamism. Especially it was important to find a language capable to avoid too much urban sprawl, regular dispersion of individual houses, that create human concentration, avoid the trap of dormitory. That was normal, very much normal in the urbanism of the 60s and the 70s. Either we have the dormitory city, which was especially common in the European town planning, or the urban sprawl that characterized American urbanism. So there was an attempt to make a kind of compact city that gives space to individual and private life and would help to evolve a mobility without necessarily going for individual transport and car and traffic congestion. One of the elements in search of this dynamism initially was to look for polarity that create an element of polarity that in a layout can create the element to give a city. That's evolved in one more concept, which try to, where there are two macrostructures, and combined with structure with area with lower density. These two macrostructures were somehow inspired to the idea of the yin and yang, but again there was not yet the final evolution. The idea was important to have a kind of to evolve. So I'm going back. Yes, so there was an attempt to look at dynamism. This dynamism was partly thought from the road network. That means road not only as a vehicular transport, but as what is called in town planning negative space, so unbuilt space, which remained there. I mean, if you look at many cities in Europe, buildings are changing, but the basic space of square, building, park remain the same, that give a certain characteristic. These are another example of a study how to create a dynamism out of this negative space. And then another element was to create some type of innovative structure that has been called line of strand, basically area where we create a vertical city not on high, but interconnected building, where you live social life even on the third, on the fourth floor, where we might have green on the third and fourth floor. You can walk from one building to another. You might have social space, shop, activity, workshop. So basically where you're not trapped into an apartment, you're not trapped into a box, you have your own space of privacy, but at the same time you have a chance to participate in a very public life. So this took shape in this particular model, which has also one advantage. I don't know, we don't have laser pointer. We have, for example, I'll try to highlight with the mouse, we have, for example, these two areas here. I don't know if you can see from the pointer, and here. These two areas and this area, somehow which are called the Linus Friend, which are supposed to expected to host a large number of population, give this type of spiral dynamics. But then we have inside the city other area, we have this small constellation, where people would like to live more in a kind of privacy, intimate space, less social attitude is there and are available. And then the entire area is surrounded by a green belt, especially people who want to live more in contact with the nature and farm and forestry. So basically this concept is a concept that aims to accommodate different type of lifestyle, different type of psychological need, and where also people can change from one space to another according to this particular need of the moment in this life. This moment was called Galaxy afterwards. This model was approved by the mother, presented at the inauguration of Auroville in 1968. 1 year later, one American disciple noted some similarity to the photograph that NASA was sending in those days, and since then has been called Galaxy, and that is how it is known today. The city of Auroville has one important characteristic. I mean, there are 4 zones: residential, industrial, and cultural, plus an international zone. International zone is one area of exposure to the world. It's an area where we debate a lot. I mean, Bindo was making the example of the Chinese and the Tibetan. These days we have a strong discussion because there is an area for Far East Asia, and Taiwanese want to build Taiwanese pavilion, Chinese want to build the Chinese pavilion, and government are expected to support the financing the pavilion of cultural nation, and there is this kind of debate about if we build the Taiwanese pavilion, the Chinese government will not support Chinese pavilion, etc. So that's an indication how this we are very much involved in many topic discussion. Apart from this zone, 4th zone, the most important characteristic of Auroville is that the center is a peace area. Normally the city, the center is the area that is most congested or most, here in this case the center is a peace area where we have the Matrimandir, which is representing somehow the soul of Auroville, an area of silence. The Matrimandir will be possibly, it has to be seen if it's feasible, segregated for the rest of the city by a water body that's supposed also to be integrated into the water city system. And around the city area there will be, around this water body, it will be a concentration of all the spirit of all the different zones that are there manifested in Auroville. It has to be said that this conceptual plan, we have a master plan, but it's still at the level of conceptual plan, is very much debate within Auroville, like everything that we can say about Auroville, there is debate. There is a lot of discussion and criticism. Since we are only 2,000 people, and only one part live in the area of the master plan, still very little has been built of this conceptual element. And we have 2 extreme positions. I mean, on one side there is a position that feels that we don't need planning, we don't need to have structural planning. Auroville can grow in terms of, can have an organic growth. There is another very radical position that this plan, conceptual plan, is something that cannot be changed or modified at all, and in the middle, a wide spectrum, wide range of positions, which I'm will take too much time to enumerate all the different spectrum of position. One important element we have few challenges in the. I'm moving now to the challenge and the regional context. One of the key challenges we are facing in terms of planning, I will not list all the challenges because we may touch later if during the debate, but I just list a few of them. One of the main challenges is the incomplete ownership of the land. You may see in this map, the green area are the land that belong to Auroville, and the rest is land, private area, or either public land or temple land. The inner part of the area, the city, we have lucky enough to own at least 90% of the land. But the surrounding part of the region, what we call the green belt, we have only 28% of the land. So it's very important. We don't have the means out of our internal economy, we'll see later, so we try to cope with this fact with fundraising campaign. We have some, and to some extent with the policy to exchange land that we have outside with land that we have inside. One of the reasons of difficulties to buy land is that nowadays the region of Auroville is in a very prime position in terms of development, so real estate prices have rocketed. And another element is that in a rural society, in the village, land represents an element of status. You talk in the assembly, you talk in the panchayat because we have land. If you don't own land, then you cannot talk. So we buy land by people who have some more piece of land, but the last piece of land is never sold because it has an intangible element in terms of status in the local society. And that is why we have used also the system of exchange of land, which we have far away, we don't need, in order that we can acquire land for consolidated our own region, and at the same time meeting the need of the people that to maintain this land for status reason. One other aspect is that since we have this pocket of private land, we are attracting a lot of real estate investment that try to speculate by the fact that there is a township in progress. In this regard, we are having a dialogue for the last 7 years with Tamil Nadu government, because land and development matter is a competence of the state in Tamil Nadu. We have a proposal which has been submitted to the Tamil Nadu government, that has been prepared by the Tamil Nadu government. They are ready to create a kind of planning authority over a sub-region at the county level for the area of Auroville, recognizing the need to protect the experiment of Auroville, recognize the need to implement the development of Auroville along the charter. This proposal has been presented by Tamil Nadu government, not yet accepted by Auroville, I would say, because, as we will see later, we have a strong engagement with the government, and Timiodanos, Akdonex Ferentes. I'm afraid of Greek and people who bring a gift. I mean, we know that we need to engage with the government, but there is also a large section of the English population that we already have the central government cooperating involved in Auroville. To bring one more level of government involved can bring more collateral damage than benefits. So this is a debate which is going just happening in these weeks in Auroville, and it is going on only now. So I don't know what will be the fate of this proposal of the Tamil Nadu government, but coming back on what was also said yesterday, I mean, we have a state government that go to the point to create a planning authority that plan over the entire county on the basis of the principle of the chart. It is ready to do that step. These are kind of achievement that can, something that can happen only in India, I mean, it cannot happen elsewhere. One of the challenges in our development is that we are in a very fragile regional ecosystem, depending on water body. Here is the kind of map of the water body, so our development and the development of the other village area in the region should take into strict consideration of this. Otherwise, villages are developing much faster than us, Otherwise, too much fast development can really create a drain and resource on water body. Actually, this is a main challenge. We have presented a proposal to prepare a regional plan, not only for Auroville, but for the entire region, based where the development is based on water management and water consumption. And we have presented this proposal with the town planner from Berkeley that was at a meeting on Berkeley last Monday, and we have somehow a good attention from the government in this direction. One other aspect of difficulties is the urbanization, the development surrounding us. On the south, we have the urbanization of Pondicherry. From 200,000 people, it has grown to a city of 1 million people in 30 years. On the eastern side, we have institutional development, university and other institutions. On the western side, we have industrial development of Pondicherry. So we have to deal with this challenge and be part of integrated network. And finally, we have the development inside the rural area. Basically, we are involving with, there are 5 panchayat, 5 rural municipalities which are working with within Auroville, which are administration within Auroville, to basically cover 80% of the area, and we have made agreement, memorandum of understanding with them to provide technical assistance for evolving their own planning so that it can be an integrated manner. This is an idea of the villages that are surrounding us. I skipped this because of the lack of time, but basically we have to take also another element into consideration. Basically, Auroville is on a plateau. We have other population living. It is growing much faster than us. And then we have strong influx of tourists. We have 700,000 tourists per year.
Wow.
Normally 3,000 visitors per day, which is much higher than our population. On certain peak days, 7,000. But that means, and then we give work. We have a population of 2,000, 3,000, but we give work to another 7,000 people. So I mean, that drain, the strain that is on the resource of the area is much stronger than our simple presence that has to be somehow considered anyway. So that's why we had a strong interaction with the rural development. We have created many schools in the rural area. We have started a system of microcredit. We have healthcare program, dental care program. We are supporting the development of cultural centers, which are working in the direction of the maintaining and preserving local heritage. We have, for example, one school for differently able children that cater to an entire region. We are in the process with a partnership with Tamil Nadu government to create a sustainable livelihood institute for sustainable practice for training of public officers from all over South Asia. That we have a protocol and memorandum of understanding with the Tamil Nadu government that will finance the creation of this large institute. We have attention for rural dental program all over the village around. We have special technology for mud architecture. We have project for reviving lost tradition in cultural area, on which we have getting support also from the French government to create a kind of activity for promoting craft skill, but also tourism in terms of urban regeneration and in terms of rural regeneration and revitalization of the local culture. I move now to the organization, which is somehow the most complex chapter, because it might be right to say disorganization, maybe sometime, or hyper-organization. We have both. We are hyper-organized and disorganized in the same way, but somehow we manage to function. I mean, that is what the quotation of Mark Lewis made by Bindo was really very much appropriate. We debate until something emerges and goes out on this direction. Auroville has a unique statute in the world because it's run for the last 30 years by an act of the Parliament, of the Indian Parliament. There is a long history how this Parliament has been generated. To make a long story short, there has been a lot of confusion and chaos and conflict after the mother passed away, especially because the agency in charge of purchasing the land of Auroville was claiming ownership. And there was a challenge by 300-400 people, mainly foreigners, that were leaving the experiment. And what has been surprising, I think important to share, especially after hearing what was said yesterday, the Morningstar case, etc. It went into a court case until finally the Supreme Court of India directed that the Auroville experiment should be protected as there is original vision. And it went to the limit of the Constitution because the agency that has purchased the land was somehow, formally speaking, the owner of the land. But they went to the limit of the Constitution to give directive to take away the land and create a new framework where this Auroville project could continue according to original spirit of land ownership. And then this Auroville Foundation Act, then the Parliament of India had to, following the directive of the Supreme Court, created this Auroville Foundation Act. Which sometimes we are happy, sometimes we are not unhappy, but given the circumstances, I think that is something unique that a country like India has provided. I don't think that would that happen anywhere in the world. I mean, it's the system of particular culture of the country has this type of acceptance. Nowadays, I have been contacted by legislators of other countries which are interested to promote intentional community and want to start the Auroville Foundation Act to understand if they can be adapted to these things. So basically, the Auroville Foundation Act creates a governing board. It is a decision-making body that is nominated by the Prime Minister of the Prime Minister Office of India. Basically, the Auroville Foundation Act has vested all the Auroville property in the care of the foundation, which has a three-tier level. There is a governing board nominated by the Prime Minister Office, which has executive power, an international advisory council, which has mainly personality from all over the world, again nominated by the Prime Minister Office, which has non-executive power, only advisory role, and a resident assembly. The resident assembly has executive power similar, equal to that of the governing board. It's like to have in a parliamentary democracy upper and lower chamber. We can put it this way. The concept of the resident assembly was generated by the fact that the idea behind Auroville is that any decision taken within Auroville should be taken only by the resident and by the people who are participating and living in it. And the terminology resident assembly did not exist before the Auroville Foundation Act. It was invented ad hoc to give a kind of umbrella, a kind of system where this principle that Aurovillians are able to decide on themselves and determine their own life would be, should be made. And normally the resident assembly interface with the governing board and with the other components of the foundation through a working committee, which is actually a apex group which is in charge of dealing with all relation with external aspects of the Auroville life and all that are practical implementation. Expressed like that, it looks like it is a very structured organization, but it's not so. There are principles of internal organization like equality, inclusiveness, transparency, and collaboration that we need to enforce. And there is a very complex organization when we go internally. There are many groups. We don't have one single apex body. We don't have what can be called the mayor or the governor of Auroville. Each group deals with a separate area of work. There is a group dedicated to the capital asset, a group dedicated to the running expenses, a group dedicated to entry, a group dedicated to planning, a group dedicated to land. So it's a kind of horizontal organization, but without any upper and vertical situation. Plus, in addition to this, we have a lot of other working group, expression of interest. I mean, we have official working group, but then we have the society itself that is organized as an expression of interest. We have group that are taking care of the business activity, we have group that takes care of the forest, we have group that takes care of the farm, and so on. Any type of activity get its own group that decide what are the collective rules within that frame of activity, and then on its own time share with the overall decision-making process. And plus, we have institutions like Matrimandir, we have a SAIER, which is an important institution for educational research. We have a Center for Scientific Research, and we are going to create a new other. So it is a complex system where there are official working groups, there is informal working group which are expression of interest, and there are institutions. All these has to interrelate. And all this goes into decision making, which is actually, legally speaking, can be taken only by the resident assembly. And here where we go into an clarity of process, because the principle we are having is that of inclusion. We don't want to take decision by a majority overruling a minority. We are now experimenting with the system, which may look unfair to a certain aspect, due to the fact that official decisions are not very difficult to be taken. Now we have a system that when there is a proposal to a guideline or a decision to be made, etc., now that proposal is discussed in a general meeting. If there is universal consensus, we go on. If there is not, then what is called RAD, Resident Assembly Decision-Making Process, takes place. That means another general meeting is called to formulate a proposal. The participant to the general meeting decide the question that has to be formulated for a general decision making, and then there is a formal decision making that takes place 2 weeks after, either voting on ballot or voting online, and a decision making is valid if 10% of the adult population has been voted. It seems quite unfair because we have a very low quorum for decision making, but on the other side is that an incentive to participate. One of the weaknesses of the system of Auroville is that being the system of going for overall inclusion, non-participation was a means to obstruct any decision. So we have a very low quorum. Some people say it's very low, but it's meant to prompt participation. Be aware that if you don't participate, a minority can decide for you. Maybe it's a bit brutal, but that is the phase we are going through now in this period. I will go quick look to the Auroville finance and economy before leaving space to question. So basically, we are aiming to have a society where we have nomadic exchange within the Auroville economy, and that by itself creates a complexity, because either we do the same things to everyone, which is not fair, we do the same haircut for everyone, or we try to customize to a different need. And for that, we need to have a huge amount of information. And so actually, that's why we have a lot of projects in Auroville which are catering to data management, to understand the information, how can the information help for the welfare of people. We are very far to find the right solution, but that is a time that is going on this direction. And it creates by itself the fact that we don't want to be simplified and be uniform for everyone, a very complex internal system complex. Of course, we need to have resources from outside. I mean, Auroville aim to be a self-sufficient economy, not a self-sufficient economy, a self-supporting economy. Self-sufficient means that we do everything that we need. It was maybe the ideal at the beginning, when in '68 the basic need was food, clothing, and fuels. The idea of the industrial zone of Auroville was to just make what it was needed for Auroville, the inhabitant need, and selling the excess. Now the concept of basic need is changed. I mean, we need computer, we need telephone, we need many things, so we cannot think to have a self-sufficient economy, made all this on our own. We made an attempt which has not been very successful, by the way, to have our own internal telephone system, but that is another story, and I will tell another time. So we interact a lot with the outside. We have a very, under the Auroville Foundation Act, we can create trust and unit that are economic enterprise that where ownership of capital does not belong to the executives. They have full freedom of management, but capital belongs to the collectivity. There is no profit distribution. 33% of the profit are given to a central fund, that aim to support Auroville. 33% of the profit are used for supporting specific projects which are interesting the manager of the unit. In that sense, there is a certain freedom of choice. It's not only tax, and 1/3 of the profit stay for the need of the economic activity, for the capital, for the working capital, etc. We have, basically, we are a system at the moment is one of our richness, but one of our difficulties of 400 mini micro enterprise. Because our largest enterprise, which are a turnover in terms of very few $1 million, would be treated as a small-scale enterprise all over outside. And we have 400 of this such a unit, and we have an overall economy which the last year was corresponding more or less to $45 million. And 2/3 of this of the income of the supporting the city are coming from this 400 micro enterprise. Another 14% is coming from service unit that we have developed inside Auroville. Our unit were not looking for profits, they're looking only to work on cost basis. But through the cost basic system, they recover something that go back to the main communal pot. And about 20% of our income comes from donation, which is donations come from different sources, from the Indian government. They come from, they come in an equal manner, 20% from the Indian government, 20% from India, 20% from abroad, 20% from individual unit, and 20% from Aurovillians that want to build out themselves and want to be and want to locate there. So that is somehow one of our weeks. How do we use this money? Let me check because I don't see well here. Because my computer is very small. Yeah, we are there, and then it's just a slide and then I stop. But our budget is used. You may see from this slide that education represents the main item for expenditure from our current expenditure. More than 20% is spent for education. A big area of education for our activity goes into farm and forest, village development, goes to health service. And interestingly enough, for a town that, for a place that has the ambition to become a town, we spend very little amount of money on land and town development. So basically our system, somehow if I can summarize before closing and opening for a question, is somehow capable to self-supporting a collectivity of 3,000 people on a moderate level of income that can take care to the basic need. Is not yet capable to invest for further expansion and development, for which we are depending from donation, and this represents the major weakness of our economy at the moment. Okay, thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Both of those presentations had so much. Yes. We don't have a lot of time.
Could I invite?
Absolutely.
Surema is
So there's these two are long-term residents, and this is a lifelong resident. She was born there. So yeah, I would love to hear from each one of you, maybe as residents and as members of the community, as you reflect on these patterns of evolution and then look into the future and the challenges. Two things. What is the main learning, insight, success factor that you feel is present in Auroville and that can be offered to the world and that can be implemented by many other places? And what is the main question that when you come out of Auroville, you bring in your heart and in your mind, because it's something that you're trying to figure out who has insights or wisdom for you to bring back into Auroville? Who would like to begin? Who would like to answer?
I'll take the first question and think a bit more about the second one. So for you, the first question was again, what is the main, what keeps us alive, what keeps us going, what works, right?
Can benefit the world.
Yeah. For me, it is really, Auroville is absolutely dedicated to those ideals, those three seminal texts that I said, the charter, it's our goodwill and sincerity. We really want to make it happen. We fight a lot, but in the end, we know we're all united around those. So for me, that's the main thing.
Yeah, on the same line is resilience. I mean, that is whatever one goes through different phases and difficulties, but there is a common feeling which is going through the entire population of Auroville. Strong collective sense of resilience and moving forward. And that's why make me understand what is the need of intentional city, because I mean you can share value everywhere, but there is a sense of collective ownership. There are people and that collective ownership of this value and this sense of collective membership, and that is a way of strength and a way forward. There are people which, for example, have totally different opposite point of view. Sometimes say, oh, I would be happy if they disappear from Auroville, but at the same time, the moment I think this, I feel that there is a kind of loss, even if the people was the diametrical vision to mine is there. So this sense of being united by something which at the moment is still intangible, we cannot really define, unless we want to go into religious dogmatism. It is something that we don't want to go. Actually, we have the dogmatism or non-dogmatism in Auroville. So, but we have this type of intangible feeling of being part of something of a collective effort that is a way forward, and that's why we are still there, and we are still an important element. We are still an institution where people in local realities they have to confront with us.
Thank you. This is in addition to what Bindo and Sauro have already said, because I do feel like the spiritual ideals that are so present and so formative are critical. What I would add, in answer to your first question, is autonomy. I feel that the carving out of an autonomous space in which we can experiment, in which we have freedom to do so, is so vital. I think it's really inspiring. I think that what emerges from those kinds of spaces is often so far beyond what we imagine, especially in the West. You know, we've been conditioned to see anarchism as something inherently destructive, and I think that what Auroville shows, I like to think of it as a creative anarchy. And I would also say, you know, in terms of my being born and raised there, the autonomy was so huge for me in terms of developing as an individual, because I felt that I had the space not only to express myself fully, you know, free of a lot of conditioning, but also to engage from a really young age and at so many scales in actually shaping my own environment. And I think that that's only possible when you have an environment that is free from so many rules that often prevent us from doing so. And since I have the mic, I'll answer the second question, which is, what is your question when you go outside? So Bindo and Sauro both already raised that one of the issues, one of the things that I think a lot of Aurovillians share in terms of frustration is our collective processes. And I think this is so funny because all around the world, consensus decision making, you know, the kind of political organization that we have is seen as like the cutting edge of progressive, or, you know, organizing as a polity. And yet here we are practicing it and feeling so frustrated by its limitations. And so one curiosity that I have wherever I go is, how do people collectively organize? You know, what can I learn from all these spaces and what can I bring back, and how can we sort of continue to crack this nut?
Do you have additional thoughts?
I will just add to what Suryamai said and broaden the context. I think the challenge of building a new society is interpersonal dynamics. I mean, those of you who have lived in relationships must know how hard it is just to be in a good, kind relationship with one person. And here you're trying to have a community. So this is where we bog down. I think one of the forms is our governance and decision-making process. And I know that that's true of many, many other intentional community. We all kind of stick there. Just to elaborate a bit on that, the challenge with participatory democracy is, for those of you who are familiar with spiral dynamics work, you get stuck in the green mean. Everybody has got a right. It's a postmodernist world. There's no single truth, so everybody keeps talking endlessly. But I would also add, what is really also sad about Auroville and interpersonal dynamics is, for some reason, we're actually very unkind to each other.
Oh.
I know people who have been really scarred and bitter about how they were treated, because we're very passionate. So Sauro and I will fight about how a certain thing should happen. And sometimes we don't know how to heal, and that and move on. So I think Auroville, it's slowly changing again. In recent years, there are groups that have brought in concepts from the West about how to resolve conflict. So there is a conflict resolution group. There is a group which does restorative justice, but I think we could do with more transpersonal work around there.
The question when I'm going out is, what can I take and learn to bring into Auroville? Because yes, I emphasize the fact that we try, capacity building is one element of our society, we try to share what we learn, but the world does development in terms of research, both inner research and outer research, much faster than we have to develop. I would say 20 years ago we were a creative society. Now I would say our strong point is more not so much to bring so many innovation, or so we bring many, but to be receptive to innovation that comes from outside. And I've seen I went to India first time 40 years ago looking for something else that was not there in Europe, but I can see in Europe and in the West and in many other countries, also in the East, in Asia and all the countries, there is a lot that is happening, a lot of research, creative research and evolution. So that I feel that we have a lot we have to give, but we have a lot also to learn and share. And maybe offering a place, what is the strength point of Auroville, not so much to be the best in a particular field, but to be a field, an area where all innovation can be practiced and attempted if percolated there.
Thank you. I know that we're on time, but since we started a little bit late, I want to ask a few more questions. I'm curious about any examples or just ways in which you are aware that you are bridging the difference or managing that difference between the way you are going about making decisions and living within Auroville, which is spiritually based, values driven, and when you have to interact with the outside world and you have to kind of negotiate or you mentioned capitalism as one influence, and just for example the issue of land. What do you do when internally you're looking at land in a completely different way than from a real estate development perspective, which is very much just an investment or is greed driven? So just any insights that you have about that kind of clashing of the way you're thinking about living and life versus some of those values that are still basically dominating global culture.
Katya, if I understand you, is how do I operate in people with different worldviews, right? How do I? When internally we have such a strong core. Actually, one thing very nice about Auroville is we're really known for integrity. We really try to act from the values, so it's much easier to work in Auroville, as you say. For me, it's a bit like choosing different clothes. You know, I'm not losing my soul just because I wear a different kind of dress. And of course, today I'm wearing an Indian kurta, but when I'm in the West, I dress like a Westerner. So for me, it's a bit like that. So I adopt the language, the positioning to the people that I'm interacting with. Does it? Yeah. So I'm not losing myself.
Do any of you have any example or sense of like sometimes you feel conflict or tension or like have to hold a paradox in particular ways?
All the time?
No specific examples spring to mind right now, but I mean, I have a background in social cultural anthropology, and I know you do too. And so, I mean, how I would answer that question is, yes, of course, we confront difference all the time. You're speaking about, we have non-capitalist values, but yet we're entrenched in a dominant capitalistic context. And one thing that I would say is that within Auroville, there really is, and we spoke about this on Friday evening, there really is the emergence of a new sort of transnational culture within Auroville. And I think that the shift is experiential. I think that people who come and spend time in Auroville, not everybody, but a lot of people transform as a result of experiencing these different ways of relating, these different ways of being. So, I mean, that doesn't necessarily benefit us immediately in terms of when we're dealing with land issues, but that kind of transfusion is happening at other scales, and it's very much about experiencing a different culture.
Being Italian, having a background of Italian university with a strong imprint of Hegelian and Marxist ideology, I see conflict as a dialectic system, as a creative energy. I mean, maybe it's wrong and maybe it's part of my background, so I'm not so much disturbed from that. Although one element, if I need to give an example, is on land. The way we deal with land, and then the way, as you've seen with the map, land is dispersed, one plot of Auroville, one plot of private people. We have a vision of land that is something that we want to take care, that we want to regenerate, and after generating, taking care. And the way India is developing fast these days is going towards a fast economic urbanization, regulatory organization, and industrial development. And where land is becoming one of the strongest assets. I mean, a piece of land in our area may cost as much, or even as in San Francisco, just to give you an idea, but the per capita income of San Francisco. One farmer, let's say an acre of land, get in one go what you get in 150 year farming, just to give an idea. So we are constantly confronted every day with this idea to develop a society where the land is treated not for its economic value, but for intangible value. And that is an area which is challenging. I mean, that is one practical example, that is the most practical example that comes to my mind.
I realize the times that I feel uncomfortable when I'm presenting Auroville to an outside audience is when people try to reduce it. So, for instance, when I was invited to give a presentation on Auroville at the Global Eco-Village Network, and I was like, you know what, it's not really an eco-village, and I don't want to reduce this experiment to an eco-village. So this is why this conference is perfect, and CIS is the perfect location to speak, because there is this quest for what would a new society look like, and that to me is what Auroville is about. It's an experimentation with society itself.
One last question, sir. Okay. So you did mention spiral dynamics just a moment ago, and I was just curious in your observations and experience from the perspective of conscious development and human development. I see a lot of what's happened in Auroville, kind of this transition, individually and collective, from a lower, more childish kind of consciousness, right, where we want government and we want somebody to take care of us, versus like this now shared responsibility, collective decision making. But you also have alluded to some of the challenges of that participatory democracy, because not everybody, I mean, we don't develop at the same rate, even though maybe everybody wants that is there has this spiritual commitment. there is still differences in how, like you mentioned also spiritual bypass, right? Like people that may think that they are already spiritually developed and they're still struggling with some other patterns in their psyche. So what are your observations and practices and insights, particularly from the perspective of learning and education? Like how do you support the evolution of the individual so that through that you're supporting the evolution of the culture?
So I can answer specifically from my own educational experience, which is that we have one particular program in Auroville schools called Awareness Through the Body. And it is based on integral yoga, specifically on Sri Aurobindo's, I was going to say conception, but it's really based on experience of the different planes and parts of the being. Psychic, mental, vital. Actually, Bindu had the chart up there earlier. And so one of the things that we learn from a really early age is how to, first of all, to identify these different parts of our own being, to refine our understanding of them, to refine our experience of them, to learn how to observe them, to learn how they're interrelated, and ideally how to harmonize them. So all of that kind of psycho-spiritual work begins, at a really young age for the children who are born and raised there. And from having spoken to my peers and done research on education, that is the thing that consistently comes out as the most formative aspect of their education.
First of all, Katya, there are no, apart from the actual school systems in Auroville, there are, because it's not being driven top down, we leave people to chart out their own path for individual development. And as I said, it's not that everybody takes the responsibility to try and develop. Some do, some don't. It's just left to the individual. Just to share another bit of qualitative research, I will also be speaking very soon in the Bay Area about Auroville as explorations in human unity. So I was doing some interviews around that. And this friend of mine who is very much into spiral dynamics, he said what's fascinating about Auroville is any meeting you go to, first of all, you're not only confronted with people from different nationalities and cultures. I mean, look at us. There are just 3 of us who came and we each come from a different nationality and different age. So we have your mix of nationalities and cultures, you have a mix of ages, and also you have a mix of development stages because each person is. And I know the Auroville experiment was set up that way because Shubhendu's ideal was, it doesn't help to bring only one kind of people, all the green mean people to build a new society. You have to have, and this person said, but through that interchange, which as we said can be conflictual, I think everybody takes a small step towards their own growth.
Found it difficult to answer this question because we don't have a really fixed system of items. Just to give you an idea, in the field of primary education, we have 4 different types of schools. I mean, with 4 different types of, from almost homeschooling, structured homeschooling to free progress to a kind of structural system that going there. And even in the history of Auroville, we went through different phases. There was an initial phase where no school, last school, I mean the first school, first building made in Auroville 68 were 2 schools, one was called last school and there were no school, just to give the idea of the society for an ending education. Then we went into a phase where we needed for the children who were going up there to have a choice. So we have a particular schooling system which is hybrid, taking a bit the curriculum from outside so that people can give the exam as a private exam and attend the university outside. And for the time being it has been a wave. And now we have a wave back towards more informal schooling and to give an accent to professional training. It's a new area where we are exploring. I mean, we had a booming phase where everyone has to study to go to the university abroad. Now we are trying to develop a curriculum and course for professional learning and in different fields. So in a way, we are an interesting phenomenon because the surrounding village everyone get in debt to have his children go to university and become a white collar. And the last 2 years we are trying to experiment to, okay, give not everybody has to go to university. We need the society, need to have people has different way to manifest itself. So we are trying to promote this type of thing. So I don't have really an answer how Auroville do, except that each one is free to explore his own path.
Thank you. So just before we close, maybe if there's a burning question from the audience?
I want to honor it.
A burning question. Bindu, you mentioned that one of the images is the spiral galaxy town model of about 50,000 people. So I was doing some rough calculations. That would be comparable to CIIS growing to 40,000. And I wonder, I mean, is this an ideal, or are there real efforts being made to grow to that number, given what at least I consider the complexity of the organizational structure and economic structure that you have?
Oh, it's okay, I'm asking, sorry. Is it specific?
Yeah, this is a question that many people have in Auroville. And many people try to evade this question, say, well, if you take the population surrounding, we have already 50,000, which is not true, because the population surrounding is about, the actual is much less based on the census figure. I mean, the point is that I don't know if there is some fixity in this number of 50,000. There are different stories about how this 50,000 number came about. But definitely the idea is to have, if you want to make an experiment that help to change the human consciousness, you need to have a kind of critical mass, a critical society. If you do something which is 10 people or 100 people, might not have an impact in San Francisco, Los Angeles, or Moscow, etc. But if you are attempting at the scale of a society that is part of the city, and half of the world population will live in the city, and if you are able to transform the dynamic of the city in something more livable and sustainable, so that is something that can be a really contributor, otherwise becoming isolation. So there is no question what will be the complexity of the organization, because we are used in conventional society to have several tools, a government that decides, money as a medium of exchange that somehow simplify the life, I mean, at least in terms of diagram. They make it more complex on many other things, but you want something, you come with $10 and you get something because that item is valued $10. When you go in a society that doesn't want to use money, doesn't want to have a government impose rule, then you enter into a more complex system. There is this apprehension that making to a system of 50,000 will become more complex than as of now when we are 3,000. Mother once gave a reply to this, and I can just share as a reply, I don't know if it will be true. All your difficulties and complexity in your organization is that because we are a very limited number. The time you become at least 10,000, 15,000, the social dynamic will become more easier. And the more you grow and the more it is embedded in the system, the more it will have its own dynamic. Hopefully she's right. I mean, let's hope that she's right, because that is the aim. But definitely, I believe that, I don't know if it has to be 50,000, maybe less, maybe more. I mean, Auroville is big enough that cannot even more people than 50,000. Even some people say it will be too crowded. The importance is that to be able one day to achieve an experiment where at the scale where something radically different is implemented, not only attempted. So hopefully it will not fail. I'm convinced that we will work, but that is the explanation.
I just want to add one small point, Michael, in answer to your question. So we tend to think of larger societies, again, this is like a dominant assumption, right, that larger societies are more complex than small societies. But if you actually look at the research on communities, so one of the foundational scholars is Anthony Cohen, he talks about how actually small communities, small societies, are far more complex than larger societies. Because in larger societies you have anonymity, so you have a whole area of social dynamics that just doesn't occur, that you're not confronted with. And I think that, in a way, the challenge of Auroville might be, how can we become a larger society without succumbing to what other large societies have done, which is resort to standardization, bureaucratization, and actually really an oversimplification and a more of a subsumption of the individuals within that society.
Thanks, Rima. That was a nice insight that I hadn't thought about. And I think the two of us are also fully in agreement with what Sauro was sharing. Just a couple of tangential thoughts on Michael's question. One is, I think, unfortunately, life is always pushing us to always hold two dialectic oppositional forces in check. One is, yes, I agree with Sauro, there is something nice also about being at a certain critical mass. But at the same time, you also have to look at the carrying capacity of the land. And there are challenges that we're already exceeding in so many places. And then we have the economic factors. We definitely do not want to do what happened to Rajneeshpuram, cart busloads of homeless people and bring them in, just so that you can have an autonomous city. But to give you an example, sadly, one of the challenges in joining Auroville, especially for young people, is the increasingly prohibitive costs of building a house for a shelter. At the same time, we are looking at providing free housing, especially to young people. But if we provide free housing, given the economic situation of India, we would have people joining Auroville for the wrong reason. We really want people to be called to the ideals. So this is one of the challenges. And my last thought is, what to me is so beautiful is just the image of a city, what I call the guiding image. That itself pulls Auroville to become a city. We have the population of a village, like 2,000, 2,500 people as a village population. But believe me, you find all the activities that a city can engage in Auroville. And yeah, so that's nice.
Thank you. This was incredibly illuminating, and thank you everybody for participating this morning.
Okay, with that we conclude this morning session. Please go for lunch. Take a little time to see the books in the utopian press stall over here, and the Auroville books over there. Spend a few moments to look at the exhibition on the wall. That's another sort of element. And come back at 1:30 for the education panel.